So I went to Gencon a couple of weeks ago, and one of the coolest things about that show is all the things that you don't expect to see when you're there. It's a really big convention, and there's a ton of different companies showing off their games. And when I went this year, I found a game called Zynvaded that I'm super excited about. But rather than just having you listen to me talk about it for the whole video, I thought it would be a good idea to pull in an expert on the subject.
My name is John Vogel. I am the head of We Have Issues Publishing. We've been around since about 2007. Started off initially publishing a comic book. I didn't really take off very well. That's just a really hard business to get into, especially if you're indie. And so we decided, well, we're gamers. Why don't we make a miniatures game? Because that's really my thing. I so much prefer miniatures games over most other types. And so then it became like, well, what do we do? I mean, there's so many different things out there. And so I was thinking about it for a while, and I had an idea from high school for a comic book that I never did anything with. And I thought, well, this would be good because this means, with the way the setup of the game is being 1-1 scale, we won't have to come up with any terrain or anything like that. You won't have to worry about that. Pretty quick, get up and get going playing at games. So the premise is that there were a race of insect-based aliens that had come to our planet with the intention of invading and conquering us. When they got here, they had no idea how large we actually were. Half the fleet still wants to attack, the other half doesn't, so they're fighting each other for control of the fleet. So you set the game up on any flat surface you can find, and the more clutter you have, the better, because your clutter is actually their terrain. So because all the figures, of course, like I said, 1-1 scale, all the figures are actually life size.
So I actually picked up a bunch of Zynvaded models while I was at Gen Con, and I've been working on getting them painted up over the course of the last couple of weeks. I went through and kind of quickly painted up two of the factions using Slapchop, just so that I could have the models ready to put them down on the table and get playing. But this right here is one of my favorite models in the whole line. And we're going to explain a little bit more about who he is later in the video, but I thought it might be fun to paint him up throughout the rest of the video while we talk about the game. So if you know me and my channel, then you know that I'm of course going to be interested in the lore for Zynvaded.
It started out the reason for the Zin coming to our world was their planet, the planet Zin, where they're from, they were kind of where they had reached kind of the apex of their society, but they were still kind of being pestered by other races. The primary being the Scales, a race of lizard folk. They would use them for like labor, food, that sort of thing. And eventually, the Zen just got tired of it, so they decided, well, we're taking off. We're going to find another world. And so they did. They headed out to the stars, sending probes in all directions to, find a suitable place to land. Well, a probe got to our planet, and when it landed, it crashed through the roof of somebody's home and landed on their gaming table. And so it was damaged a little bit. It was still taking still photos and doing scans, and the information that got sent back made it seem like humans were just like an inch or so tall, and that they were somehow made of a plasticky or metal type of constitution. So the Zen were like, yeah, these guys are going to be such a pushover. That's not going to be a problem at all. So therein led the reason why when they got here, they're like, oh no, we were way larger than they thought they were going to be. So when they landed, realizing their mistake after a shuttlecraft landed in the street, unbeknownst to most anybody else, they kicked out. They came out with the guns blazing and stuff like that, ready to go. And they proceeded to get stomped on by just some person walking down the sidewalk. So they pulled back, retreated into the shuttle, and took off, back to their landing craft, and realized that, well, we're stuck here. We don't have enough resources to get back out into space to find another planet where we're at for now, and we got to make the best of it. Well, half the fleet's like, well, we're here. We should still be attacking and taking these people over. Look, they're compared to our technology, they're primitive. But the other half was like, yeah, but they're enormous, so it would take way more of us to get like one or two of them. So they started infighting, and they ended up splitting into two factions. So now the Zin operate as the Save 'em, who don't want to fight. They just want to lay low, gather resources, and stay off our radar. And then the other faction, the Kill All, they want to be out there plowing forward with the invasion, conquering our planet and subjugating us. So they've been steadily waging a tiny little civil war amongst each other here and there, like taking snipey shots at each other. They did manage to fashion a beachhead of sorts in the basement of a Chinese restaurant. That's where they kind of found that was the closest facility to them where they could kind of hide their group in. And so what happens now is any restaurant order that goes out, any to-go order, they have small crews hiding inside so they can start to branch out, like doing recon and things like that. The kill all want to do it as an invasion foothold. The more houses they can get into, the faster the invasion's going to go. Whereas the save them just want to do recon. They want to see what they're up against. They want to see what possible resources they can take advantage of. And so you've got little teams that are scattering out home to home, kind of infighting with each other, while they're trying to settle out what they're going to do.
So the Save 'em and the Kill All are two of the main factions, and they use the same models. You can just differentiate them with different paint schemes. But there's also some more factions.
In the process now of having, set up a little beachhead and things, they discovered the insects on our world and figured, well, that's some cheap labor right there. So they started using our bugs for like mules and other things, strapping equipment to them and sending them out for recon as well. Well, over time now, the radiation off of their equipment and their ships has started to mutate our bugs so that they're starting to gain sentience. But of course, the Zin, being as advanced as they are, still have always kept looking at them like just a bunch of dumb bugs, like simpletons. They don't think much of them. Well, that was great for the Terra because that gave the Terra the ability to slowly start harvesting equipment and weaponry and things like that from the Zin until they were ready, and then they just took off. They broke free and they escaped to create their own little bases of operations. So while the Zin are fighting amongst each other, the save them not to fight, the kill all to conquer, the Terra want everybody off the planet. They're tired of all of them. They want them all gone. This is their world, and they want it all to themselves.
And if three factions isn't enough, how about some zombie bugs?
Well, now in the course of fighting, like a year or two have passed, they discovered that with the use of earth-based pesticides and things, that has a weird effect on their altered physiologies, both the alien physiology of the Zin and the altered Terra physiology, where the pesticides have the effect that if you die because of or near active pesticide, it can actually reanimate them into like a zombie-like state. So that's where we get the Zed bugs. Not all Zed bugs are fully, dead at that point. Some are just altered like drastically, which is where you get characters like the Necromancer. He wasn't killed by pesticide. He was altered by it and like infused with like almost like a death magic type ability. He can control Zed bugs, so they're not just shambling around, wandering brainlessly, just trying to find, fresh targets. He can actually like organize them and, direct their attacks. You have other characters like Berserkers and Grubadiers who, while being Zed bugs, still have a little bit of their mind to them, and they go kind of ape. Like the Berserker's he's just a beat stick with 2d6 maces that he runs around with. In the Berserker, or the Grubadier rather, he just hucks Zed grubs all over the place. Any kind of Zed grub gets close to him, he can pick it up and just toss it at somebody. So
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, then don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything that we have coming up. I'll definitely be doing more videos on Zynvaded as new stuff comes out and all sorts of other games, so stick around, you won't want to miss it. If you want to support the channel more, then consider sharing this video with someone who you think might find it interesting. You can also check out the links in the description where you can check out the Patreon and the merch store, where you can support the channel directly and help me keep putting out these videos. But let's get back to it. Now, if you check out the Zynvaded website, you might notice that there's a whole bunch of other models, and some of them you might notice look a little familiar. Well, there's a good reason for that.
now, since they've landed, part of their operations has been to observe the different like feeds from our world, like cable, internet, like radio and things like that. And so what happened is the Zin are a drone-based society, as most insects are. You have your workers, you have your your leadership or royalty or whatever, and that's the way they prefer it. If you're in one of the different corps, like the leaders, the supports, and the scout, those are all three corps. Amongst those are subdivisions. You have your snipers for your scouts, your swordsmen, your recon. These are all jobs that are chosen as grubs. They're put into those, they're trained in that, and that's what they are. That's what they do. Well, being inundated by our pop culture all the time, some of the Zin and Terra have started to kind of like rework their personality, created personalities where they're not really supposed to have them, and modeled them based off their favorite characters from pop culture. Now that tends to cause a rift with the higher ups because they want drones. They like, listen, just go, drone Z715, you go do your job and that's it. Well, they start identifying these characters, start dressing like them, start behaving like them. That's not in the Zin's best interest, they feel. They want mindless drones to do their jobs. So a lot of the mercs were given basically the choice of you either conform or you're done, we'll get rid of you type of thing. So a lot of the mercs have basically jumped ship literally and started to fend for themselves, but realize this kind of a lonely life. I should probably try to wedge in work where I can here and there. So they still hire themselves out to the Zyn or the Terra or whoever. Now the Zyn aren't real happy about that, but whatever it takes to get the job done. They're okay with it if they can utilize their skills. If your skills and abilities are useful, they're willing to look a little bit of a blind eye as long as you're just like a quick hire or something like that. So that's mostly where a lot of them come from. Some of them are still kind of held in, like Caps America. He's such a rallying champion that they've allowed him to stay in ranks, and he's an actual captain in the leader corps, but he's also a merc. So he rallies the troops and all that stuff, but he's allowed to maintain his kind of quirky little personality as long as he's doing good for the Zyn. Whereas others like Z800, he significantly altered his body to look like, the Terminator. He's got half a robotic face, with stuff bolted on and all that. And it's just disruptive to them. So he just farms himself out for help. The one merc that's the exception is Zoucha. He's the one that looks like the Predator. He is actually from the Scales. What happened was the Scales, when they saw that the Zyn were leaving, they sent scouts out everywhere to see if they could figure out where the Zyn went. Well, when Zoucha got here, he got here like a year or two ahead of the Zyn. And so he's all by himself, so he was left to forage for his own. When the Zyn landed, he found them and realized, well, I'm all by myself. I better make do. And so he, came up waving the right flag and like, hey, it's be cool. So he's been allowed to work with the Zyn, but they don't quite fully trust him. So he's one of the few mercs that don't have a spot that they can just slide into, but he can join in as an extra member to the team. And now once the Scales arrive, which will be shortly, he'll have his home group that he can work with again.
So that's the story and all of the factions plus the mercs. There's a whole bunch of stuff available in the range already, but with that, let's talk a little bit about the game itself.
The idea for us was we wanted a simple game that people could get started with the ability to ratchet it up as it goes along. But we wanted kind of an intro game to miniatures games because, believe it or not, a lot of people that come and stop at our booth are not typically miniature game players or have since stopped because it just gets to be too much. Like, I mean, if you play like 40K or something like that, you need a whole lot of stuff to get going, and that burns people out at times or keeps them from actually wanting to get into it because it's just so daunting. So we wanted to keep it fairly simple. We use a D10 system. You roll a dice, you add it to their skill, and you check it against a stat on your enemy. And so we wanted to make it easy enough for somebody that wasn't familiar with the miniatures games to jump into. And it's also why we kept it to a small level skirmish. Like for the most part, you're going to have 3 characters that you're running as a team. And that's pretty much it. I mean, obviously, as it goes on, you add a merc or you add attachments. And like the Zed bugs run a little bit differently. They can have a few more characters on the board just because of how they operate. We wanted to keep it simple, alternate activation. It didn't first start out like that. You moved your whole team and then your opponent moved their whole team. But we jumped over to alternate activations, like I move a character, you move a character, I move, you move. So it keeps people engaged, makes it fun for people. And yeah, just like I said, we really wanted to keep it an easy add-on for people to get started, and for kids too, because my biggest playtesters were my own kids back when they were young. I mean, they were like 7, 9, and I think 11 when they first started playing. We're working on advanced rules for anybody that wants anything, more heavy duty and more ingrained. But we also allow people to house rule stuff, which makes it fun for them. If they all agree on something, go ahead, do it. we're not precious with our rules. We don't view it as like written in stone and dear God, how and why would you ever do that? Ugh. We want people to have a good time while they're playing, so we don't get all wound up on things.
Now, just like any good skirmish game, this game also has a whole bunch of scenarios that you can play. And in Zynvaded, they're actually really interesting and very flavorful.
Like, because anybody can just do a meat grinder beatdown. Okay, that's the typical war game scenario thing. But see, with these guys, the starter sets in the box are obviously equally matched. I mean, the only way you're going to get over is better dice rolls or worse dice rolls, uh, and then like scenario objective. So we wanted people to have things to do. We want like to give the bugs a reason to be there. And one of the missions even actually uses the box itself, the starter box that it comes in, and actually uses that as a focal point. But we put little grub tokens into the box because those represent your future troops. And so we have a couple missions where you have to go in and get as many as you can off the board, or rescue one from the opposing team. But otherwise, yeah, they're pretty easy to get into, and they don't require a lot of anything. I mean, again, just lay the game out anywhere, deck out the area to kind of suit it. Maybe move a couple things around, but otherwise. And I think it's the starter. I think it even has kind of a mini campaign that goes with it inside, so you can like if you're in your house playing, you can basically configure the little map in there to kind of suit what your house is. Like if you fight in the bathroom, like whoever wins has this advantage next game, in that environment. Like if you play in the kids' room, you get this advantage, play in the garage. So there are different things to give you incentive to try out different rooms in your house.
Now, this campaign system is actually really cool. It actually comes with a map of a fictional house, and you can fight out battles in different rooms, and they each have special rules that apply. But you can also take those rules and map out your own house and then use that as the battleground. And then because the game plays out on pretty much any flat surface, you can actually play out battles in those particular rooms to represent the different factions taking over. It's a really cool idea. I really like it, and I'm looking forward to trying it out myself. Now, competitive campaigns are really cool, but I'm also a big fan of solo and co-op play, and it turns out Zynvaded's also got us covered there.
Don't let the Zed bugs bite. That's the expansion that we did. So what you do is instead of having a three-person team or whatever, you have one hunter that goes into the zone, and there's an AI that controls the Zed bugs unless you have a player that wants to be them. So they just shamble about. You roll your D10 in whichever direction the top of the die is pointing to. That's the direction they shamble. They move one action there unless they're within range of a hunter that can detect them. And in that, what's nice is the hunters all have slots, so you can use them as mercs in your team. You can drop them into games of Invaded, and you can also use any Invaded figure, including mercs, as your hunter. So it's all cross compatible and things like that. So
In addition, there's actually a brand new campaign that uses a model called the Grubzilla, and this thing is an absolute beast.
So this is him. I don't know if you can get a feel for how big he is. So this is Zobafez, the new Boba Fett merc against him. So you can kind of see the size of it. So he's a big.
Now, I really love the unique design of the models in this game, so I asked a little bit about them and where they come from.
The kind of the aesthetic I was going for with it was like a Saturday cartoon vibe. I grew up with Saturday cartoons like well, GI Joe really wasn't Saturday morning, but like we grew up GI Joe, Smurfs, like Warbots, like a whole bunch, all the classic old cartoons that you grew up with. I just kind of like that chunky kind of feel to it, and so I do. I think a lot of times with the designs on these, not necessarily like the mercs. The mercs are all pop culture adjacent, so those are all kind of dictated. But as far as the look, but I think I kind of like I get ideas like if I see something, I don't necessarily key in right away that that's the reason why that the figure looks that way. But I've looked back at some of the old sculpts like, oh, that's where I got that idea from. Like you just see stuff out there and it just subconsciously kind of wiggles its way in. So
Now, this game's already got a lot of cool stuff. There's a ton of factions, lots of different options, and a ton of different gameplay modes. But of course, I had to ask about what we might be looking forward to seeing in the future. And to start, we're going to talk a little bit about the scales coming as a full faction.
if you looked in the case at Gencon, you saw the rough prototype for the first scale coming out. And so with them, the play style is going to be a little bit different with them because the focal point on your team is going to be the leader. The support and scout options for them are going to be like drones or critters that are helping them, because we try to, and I hate having to use this as an example. Like in Predator, you have a single hunter that comes and goes after things, and like they have like different gadgets and doodads that help them out with it. Well, it's going to kind of be what these guys are about. Their teams are basically a hunter, like a single hunting guy with assistants to help them, like an ammo drone or like a spotter drone. And then like for the beasts, there'll be like frogs that'll like lash their tongues out to hold a target in place or to reel a target in. Maybe like little tiny like snake type creatures that are venomous that when they poison you, they slow you down so the hunter can really get you, type of thing. So it's going to be a different play style than what you're used to, but like Zeds were a different play style and Terror were a different play style as well. So out the gate for the scales, we have our ranged one, which is the one you saw. Then we have a melee one that we're working on and a brute that we're working on. So the melee is going to be different than the brute. The brute is going to be like a big lummoxy, like horned toad looking dude. It's going to be crazy. So we got those coming up for scales. And then we're also working on Zedbugs only mercs, basically. So right now with the lore of it, for right now, we're letting people temporarily use mercs as a hire on, but if they want to use the mercs as a slot in a Zedbugs team, they still count as body points against the control of the leader of the Zedbugs, whatever leader you're using for that. And what we're going to do is we're creating mercs that are only Zedbugs. The narrative is going to turn, because what's going to happen is after a bunch of mercs were hired by the Zeds, they were attacked and turned. And so the remaining mercs refuse to work for the Zeds anymore. But the Zeds will still have their own mercs. You'll have characters like currently Alice is actually a merc that will work for the Zeds. She can actually be a leader for the Zeds because she has the ability to control Zedbugs. And the next game we're probably going to be working on, the working title right now is called Zed for Speed. I don't know if you saw the figures in the case at Gencon. It's going to be a racing game with grubs. They have little cockpits that slide out, so you can choose your pilot. They'll have a spot for a weapon to sit up on it, so you could choose. And as you're racing, there are little beacon poles that you set up around your track, wherever you laid out the area for them to race around. As they pass a beacon, you can roll a d10 and see what they get for either a weapon, defense, or something like that. There'll be different things you can roll to see what they're getting for that particular action. But the game itself is going to be geared more toward like a younger audience, so that none of the weapons are going to be like destructive in that way. There'll be like paint pellets or glue balls or something like that. Like nothing that's going to kill anybody, type of thing. We want it to be like kind of goofy and stuff like that. So
now that's all the important stuff I wanted to tell you about for now. If you're interested in the game, there's a couple of different ways that you can keep up with the company and stay apprised of what's going on with them.
Well, if you want to see what we have and read the lore and things like that, you can go to Zynvaded.com. That'll get you everything you need there. Otherwise, I know we're on Instagram, and I know we have a couple different pages on Facebook. So if you just search Zynvaded, it should bring you to one of them. So
I want to say a huge thank you to John for spending the time to come and talk to me about the game. I'm really excited about Zynvaded, and I'm looking forward to getting more of my stuff painted up in the near future. Zotja here is about done, and I'm really looking forward to getting him into the game. He's going to be a staple in most of my crews when I play, and I'm really looking forward to when I can play a full list of just scales. In the meantime, tell me what you think. Does this game look interesting to you? And if so, is there a particular faction or particular models that are especially appealing for you? I definitely went with a little bit of everything approach, but I'm particularly fond of the Terra. I think they look really cool, and those models are going to be on my paint table next. Be sure to check out the Zynvaded website and stay tuned for more. I want to thank the Extremely Cool Kids tier on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, Dogmatize, and Biclaps Gladiator Games, and thanks for watching.